Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Aurora, watching the alien ship approach. It was his first time seeing a real alien vessel, and his hands shook slightly as he adjusted his uniform. The ship looked like a crystal butterfly, with transparent wings that caught the light from the nearby star. "They're requesting permission to dock," said Lieutenant Amy Foster from the communications station. Her voice was steady, but Jake could see the excitement in her eyes. After 3 years of deep space exploration, they had finally found someone else out here. "Granted," Jake said. "And Amy, make sure you record everything. Earth is going to want to see this." The alien ship attached to their docking bay with surprising gentleness. Jake had expected clamps and metal, but instead the connection felt more like a soft embrace. Through the viewing port, he could see figures moving inside the other vessel. Dr. Ben Hayes rushed onto the bridge, carrying his medical scanner and looking more excited than Jake had ever seen him. "Captain, the readings are incredible. They're carbon-based like us, but their blood chemistry is completely different." "And Jake, they seem nervous." "Nervous?" Jake frowned. "About what?" Before Ben could answer, the airlock chimed. Jake straightened his shoulders and walked toward the docking bay, followed by his senior crew. This was the moment humanity had dreamed about for centuries. The airlock opened with a soft hiss. The first alien to step through was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. It wore robes that seemed to shimmer like water. Behind it came 2 others, similar in appearance but smaller. The lead alien stopped a few feet away and made a gesture that might have been a bow. When it spoke, its voice was musical but strained. "Greetings, humans of the vessel Aurora. I am Cathvar of the Zelani Trade Federation. We come in peace and with great respect." Jake stepped forward, smiling. "I'm Captain Jake Morrison. Welcome aboard. This is an honor for our species." Something strange happened then. Cathvar stepped back, and Jake could swear he saw fear in those large eyes. The other 2 aliens moved behind their leader, as if seeking protection. "The honor is ours," Cathvar said carefully. "We have waited long for this meeting, though we admit we are cautious." Dr. Ben Hayes stepped forward with his scanner, but the aliens immediately tensed. "It's just a medical scanner," Ben said quickly. "I want to learn about your biology." "Perhaps later," Cathvar said, his voice tight. "First, we must speak of protocols. There are rules about contact with your species." Jake exchanged glances with his crew. "Rules? What kind of rules?" Cathvar looked uncomfortable. His skin seemed to change color slightly, shifting from pale blue to a darker shade. "Ancient rules. From the old warnings. Surely your people know of them." "I'm sorry," Jake said slowly. "We don't know what you mean by old warnings." The silence that followed was heavy. The 3 aliens looked at each other with what could only be described as panic. Finally, Cathvar spoke again. Perhaps we should continue this conversation in a more formal setting. The Federation has protocols for such meetings. Over the next few hours, arrangements were made to meet at a place called Nexus Prime, a neutral station 3 days away. The aliens seemed eager to leave, despite Jake's attempts to make them feel welcome. They declined his offer of food, refused a tour of the ship, and barely answered Ben's questions about their technology. As their ship departed, Jake stood in the observation deck with his senior staff. Lieutenant Chris Bennett, his tactical officer, was frowning at his readings. "Captain, their weapon systems were active the entire time they were here." "Active?" Jake turned to look at him. "You mean ready to fire?" "Not ready to fire," Chris said slowly. "More like ready to run." Dr. Ben Hayes was studying his scanner readings. "Jake, their stress hormones were off the charts. Heart rates elevated. Brain activity in regions associated with fear. They were terrified the entire time." "Terrified of us?" Jake couldn't hide his disbelief. "We're the ones meeting aliens for the first time. They've obviously been spacefaring for much longer than us." "That's what makes it so strange," Ben said. "They have technology that's centuries ahead of ours. Their ship could probably destroy us without breaking a sweat, but they acted like we were the dangerous ones." 3 days later, they arrived at Nexus Prime. The station was enormous, a city floating in space with ships from dozens of different species docked around it. Jake had never imagined such diversity existed in the universe. Ambassador Lisa Carter had arrived from Earth to handle the formal first contact. She was a calm, experienced diplomat who had spent years preparing for this moment. But even she seemed puzzled by what Jake reported. "They're afraid of us?" she asked as they prepared to dock. That doesn't make sense. That's what it looked like, Jake said, and they kept mentioning these old warnings. The docking procedure at Nexus Prime was unlike anything they had experienced. Instead of a simple airlock connection, they were guided to a special section of the station. The corridors they walked through were wider than necessary, with multiple exit routes and what looked like blast shields built into the walls. "This place is built like a fortress," muttered Chris Bennett. Their meeting room was huge, with the human delegation seated at one end and the Zilani at the other. The distance between them seemed intentionally large. Lisa tried to lighten the mood with jokes about the weather and compliments about the station, but Kethvar remained formal and distant. "Ambassador Carter," Kethvar said, "before we proceed with trade discussions, we must address the security protocols." "Security protocols?" "Yes, the station has specific rules about your species. For everyone's safety." Lisa leaned forward. "I'm not sure I understand. Are we dangerous somehow?" Kethvar's color shifted again. "Not dangerous," he said carefully, "but unpredictable. The old warnings are very clear about maintaining proper respect and distance." "These old warnings keep coming up," Lisa said. "Could you explain them to us?" The alien leader looked deeply uncomfortable. "Perhaps it would be better if you discovered this information through your own research. The station's archives are available to you." After the meeting, Dr. Ben Hayes spent hours in the station's computer system. Most of the files were accessible, but he found something strange. Every reference to humans was classified at the highest levels. Every single one. Late that night, he called Jake to his quarters. On his screen was a single line of text he had managed to access. "Species classification Homo sapiens. Threat level absolute." "Threat level absolute?" Jake stared at the screen. "What does that mean?" "I don't know," Ben said. "But Jake, I've been checking the medical readings from every alien we've met. They all show the same signs of stress when humans are around. And I found something else." He pulled up a schematic of Nexus Prime. "Look at this. The human quarters aren't just separated from the others. They're isolated. The walls are reinforced, the ventilation system is separate, and there are emergency containment protocols built into every room we've been given." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "Containment protocols?" "Jake," Ben said quietly, "I don't think they're trying to protect us from the galaxy. I think they're trying to protect the galaxy from us." Commander Amy Foster checked her equipment one more time before stepping onto the ancient ship. The vessel had been drifting in space for over 800 years, according to the Zilani scanners. Its dark hull was scarred with what looked like weapon marks, and several sections had been completely torn away. "Stay close to the group," she told her team. Beside her, the Zilani scouts moved carefully through the airlock. Their leader, a young female named Zarath, seemed even more nervous than usual. Ever since the humans had arrived at Nexus Prime, every alien they met acted like they were walking on thin ice. Dr. Kate Sullivan, the expedition's historian, was already scanning the ship's walls with her equipment. "The architecture is completely different from anything in the Federation databases," she said. "This isn't Zilani, and it's not from any of the known species." The ship's corridors were wider than human standard but lower than Zilani preference. Emergency lighting flickered on as they moved deeper into the vessel. The walls were covered with symbols that looked like claw marks, but Kate's scanner suggested they were actually a form of writing. "Commander," called Chief Engineer Ryan Clark from up ahead, "you need to see this." They found Ryan standing before a massive blast door that had been torn open from the inside. The metal was twisted outward, as if something had punched through it with incredible force. But what caught Amy's attention were the smaller holes surrounding the damage. They were perfectly circular and went completely through the thick armor plating. "Weapon impacts," Ryan said, "but not from outside. Someone was fighting inside this ship." Zarath approached the damaged door carefully. Her pale blue skin had turned almost white. "Commander Foster," she said quietly, "we should be very careful. The markings, I think I recognize them." "Recognize them?" Amy turned to look at the alien. "From where?" "From the old stories. The warning tales our elders tell children." Zarath's voice was barely above a whisper. "I think this ship belonged to the Vorthak." Dr. Kate Sullivan looked up from her scanner. "I've never heard of the Vorthak. No one speaks of them anymore," Zarath said. They were the monsters of our childhood stories, the race that could destroy entire worlds, but they disappeared long ago." They moved deeper into the ship, following the trail of damage. Every room they entered showed signs of desperate fighting. Blast marks covered the walls, and in several places the deck plating had been ripped up. But strangest of all, the damage seemed to follow a pattern, moving steadily toward the ship's bridge. "It's like someone fought their way through the entire vessel," Amy said. Room by room, Ryan was studying his readings. "Commander, the ship's systems are still partially functional. I might be able to access their logs." They reached what had once been the bridge. The command center was in ruins, but Ryan managed to connect his equipment to the ship's memory core. After an hour of careful work, he managed to bring up a holographic display. The image that appeared was of a creature unlike anything they had ever seen. It was tall and muscular, with gray skin and 4 arms ending in clawed hands. Its face was fierce, with glowing red eyes and rows of sharp teeth. When it spoke, the translator struggled with the language. "Day 847 of the siege," the creature said. "The humans, they don't stop. They don't break. We hit their worlds with everything we had. Planet crackers, bioweapons, neural disruptors. Nothing works." Amy felt her blood turn cold. The creature was talking about humans, about her people. "We thought they would surrender after we destroyed their first colony." The recording continued. "Instead, they adapted. They took our bioweapons and made them stronger. They learned to turn our own neural disruptors against us. Every weapon we used became their weapon." The recording flickered, and when it cleared, the creature looked desperate. Its red eyes were wide with fear. "They're hunting us now. Our fleet of 10,000 ships has been reduced to less than 100. They don't just defeat us in battle. They learn from every encounter. They take our technology and improve it. They turn our allies against us." Dr. Kate Sullivan was frantically taking notes. "This is impossible," she said. "Humans were still using chemical rockets 800 years ago. We hadn't even left our solar system." Day 892, the recording continued. "We tried to negotiate. We offered them territory, technology, anything they wanted. Their response was simple: unconditional surrender. Not just of our military, but of our entire civilization." The creature's voice broke. "They don't want to rule us. They want to understand us. They want to know everything about how we think, how we fight, how we build. They're not just warriors. They're collectors. They collect knowledge like we collected worlds." Day 901. This is Fleet Commander Vorthak. "If anyone finds this recording, know this. Do not fight the humans. Do not threaten them. Do not even make them notice you. Species-wide survival protocol enacted. All Vorthak fleets are to avoid the Sol system and any human presence." The recording ended with the sound of explosions, and what might have been screaming. The group stood in stunned silence. Finally, Amy found her voice. "This can't be real. 800 years ago, humans were barely spacefaring." "The dates match," Kate said, checking her historical records. 800 years ago was when Earth's first faster-than-light experiments began. But according to our records, those early missions were just exploration. Zareth was trembling. "The stories were true," she whispered. "The Vorthak were the strongest race in the galaxy. They conquered hundreds of worlds. Their technology was thousands of years ahead of anyone else's, and humans destroyed them in less than 2 years." Ryan was still working with the ship's computers. "Commander, I'm finding similar logs throughout the ship. Battle reports, tactical analyses, psychological evaluations of human behavior. They studied us like we were some kind of natural disaster they needed to survive." He brought up another display. This one showed star maps with human positions marked in red. The red areas spread across the map like a disease, consuming Vorthak territory with frightening speed. "Look at this," Ryan said. "The humans didn't just win battles. They convinced other species to join them. The Vorthak had allies, but one by one those allies switched sides." "How?" Amy asked. "According to this, the humans didn't conquer them. They just talked to them, showed them a better way. The Vorthak ruled through fear, but humans offered partnership. Most species chose the humans." Dr. Kate Sullivan was reading through the psychological profiles. "This is fascinating and terrifying. The Vorthak studied human behavior extensively. They concluded that humans are evolutionarily unique. Most species develop either intelligence or aggression or adaptability. Humans developed all three." She brought up a passage that made everyone stop breathing. Subject species analysis. Homo sapiens. Conclusion: this species does not merely adapt to challenges. It transforms challenges into advantages. Recommendation: avoid all contact. Do not engage militarily. Do not attempt negotiation unless absolutely necessary. If forced to interact, show maximum respect and deference. Never threaten. Never restrict. Never assume they cannot do something simply because they have not done it yet. Amy looked at her team and then at Zarath. Is this why everyone's afraid of us? Because of what happened 800 years ago? Zarath nodded slowly. The survivors spread the word. Every species learned the lesson. Humans are not evil. They are not cruel. But they are unstoppable. When humans decide to do something, it gets done. The galaxy decided it was better to be friends with humans than to find out what happens when humans decide you're in their way. As they prepared to leave the ancient ship, Amy couldn't shake the feeling that they had only scratched the surface of something much larger. If the Vorthak were afraid enough to create warning protocols about humans, what else was out there waiting to be discovered? The journey back to Nexus Prime was quiet. Each member of the team was lost in their own thoughts about what they had learned. Humans weren't just newcomers to the galaxy. They were something that had shaped galactic civilization for centuries, and they never even knew it. Dr. Nina Ross stared at the quantum reconstruction chamber as ancient data slowly formed into holographic images. The technology was beyond anything humans had seen before, but the Zilani had given it to them freely. Too freely, she was beginning to realize. Are you sure this is safe? Asked Captain Chris Bennett, watching the swirling lights inside the chamber. The Zilani assured us it was, Nina said, but her voice held doubt. They've been very eager to help us learn about galactic history. Almost desperate, actually. The reconstruction chamber hummed to life, and suddenly they were standing in the middle of what looked like a massive city. Towers of crystal and metal stretched into a purple sky, and beings of various species walked the streets below. The technology was clearly advanced, with vehicles floating through the air and buildings that seemed to reshape themselves as needed. This is incredible, whispered Dr. Alex Morgan, Nina's research partner. The data core we found must be from one of the most advanced civilizations in galactic history. A voice spoke from the chamber's speakers, translated by the station's computer. Galactic Standard Date 2847.4. This is High Chancellor Mordan of the Hegemony Central Council. I am recording this for the historical archives. The holographic figure that appeared was tall and elegant, with silver skin and flowing robes. Its face showed both wisdom and arrogance, the look of someone who had never been challenged. Today marks the 500th anniversary of hegemony rule, the figure continued. Our empire spans 40,000 worlds across 3 galactic arms. Peace and order have been maintained through strength and wisdom. The barbarian species have been educated or contained. The galaxy prospers under our guidance. Nina adjusted the controls, moving forward through the data. Let me find something more recent. The scene shifted. Now they were in what looked like a military command center. The same figure, Mordan, was present, but his expression had changed. He looked tired and worried. Galactic Standard Date 28512. Emergency Council Session. 47. The situation with the Sol 3 inhabitants continues to deteriorate. Captain Chris Bennett leaned forward. Sol 3. That's Earth. 3 months ago, we intercepted primitive, faster-than-light signals from the Sol system. The recording continued. Standard procedure called for containment and gradual integration. A single battle group was dispatched to establish a quarantine zone. The holographic display showed a star map. Earth appeared as a small dot surrounded by a ring of hegemony ships. It looked like a simple blockade. The inhabitants of Sol 3 responded unexpectedly. Instead of surrendering or attempting negotiation, they simply disappeared. Our sensors detected no ship movements, no evacuation attempts. The human population simply vanished from our tracking systems. Dr. Alex Morgan frowned. Vanished? How do you make an entire species vanish? The recording provided the answer. We discovered the truth 6 weeks later when our outer patrol ships began disappearing. The humans had not fled. They had studied our blockade, learned our patrol patterns, and begun systematically capturing our vessels. The display changed to show damaged hegemony ships, but these weren't destroyed. They had been carefully taken apart and rebuilt. Human modifications were visible throughout, improving systems that the hegemony had considered perfect. Each captured vessel was returned to us, Mordan continued, but not as we had sent it. The humans had improved our designs. Our weapons were more powerful, our shields stronger, our engines faster. They were showing us that our technology was inferior to what they could create in mere weeks. Nina exchanged glances with Chris. They weren't just fighting back. They were proving a point. The scene shifted again. Now Mordan looked desperate, his silver skin pale and his robes disheveled. Galactic Standard Date 2852.1. The humans have broken our blockade, not through force but through diplomacy. They made contact with our subject species. In 6 months, they have convinced 12 member worlds to leave the hegemony. How? Alex asked the empty air. The recording answered her. The humans don't conquer. They offer alternatives. They show our subject species technologies we had kept from them, freedoms we had restricted, knowledge we had hidden. They ask a simple question. Why do you need rulers when you can rule yourselves? The display showed world after world declaring independence from the hegemony. But these weren't violent revolutions. They were peaceful transitions with human advisors helping each species establish their own governments. The humans have done something we thought impossible, Mordan said. They have made our subjects question not just our authority, but the very idea of authority itself. They spread concepts of individual freedom, democratic governance, and cooperative trade. Our empire is dissolving not through war but through ideas. Captain Chris Bennett was taking notes frantically. This is 800 years ago, right when Earth was supposed to be making its first space flights. The final recording was dated just months later. Mordan stood in what was clearly a ruined chamber. Smoke drifted through the air, and the sounds of celebration could be heard in the distance. Final entry. The Hegemony Council has voted to dissolve. The remaining member worlds have chosen independence, and our military has laid down arms. The humans offered us a choice: surrender with dignity or face the consequences of continued resistance. Mordan looked directly into the recording device. To future species who may find this record, do not make our mistake. Do not assume humans can be contained or controlled. They do not think like other species. Where we see problems, they see puzzles to solve. Where we see enemies, they see potential friends. Where we see the impossible, they see another Tuesday. The holographic figure paused, and when he continued, his voice was filled with something like awe. We studied them extensively before our final surrender. Humans are not just intelligent or aggressive or adaptable. They are all of these things, but more than that. They are creative in ways we never imagined. They don't just solve problems, they change the rules until the problems solve themselves. The recording ended with one final statement. Recommendation for all future galactic civilizations: treat humans with respect not because you fear them, but because they have earned it. They could have destroyed us. Instead, they freed us. The galaxy is better because humans are in it. The chamber powered down, leaving the research team standing in stunned silence. Finally, Nina spoke. Now I understand why everyone's been so nervous around us. We're not just newcomers to the galactic community. We're the species that ended the last galactic empire. And we did it without firing a shot, Chris added. We won by convincing everyone else that they didn't need to be ruled. Dr. Alex Morgan was already pulling up more data cores. There's more here, lots more. Nina, I think we've only seen the beginning. If the humans fought a war this way 800 years ago, what else might they have done? As they began to examine the additional records, a pattern emerged. Throughout galactic history, whenever a species became too powerful or too oppressive, humans would appear, not as conquerors but as teachers. They would show other species how to be free, how to govern themselves, how to solve their own problems. We're not just travelers, Nina realized. We're some kind of galactic immune system. We show up when civilizations become too rigid, too controlling, and we help them evolve. The question is, Chris said, do we do it on purpose, or is it just what humans naturally do? They found their answer in a personal log from a human captain named Sam Wright, recorded just after the hegemony's fall. I never expected any of this when we first left Earth, the recording said. We just wanted to explore, to learn, to make friends. But everywhere we went, we found people living under systems that didn't work for them. We couldn't just ignore that. Mom always taught me that if you see someone who needs help, you help them. I guess that's just what humans do. The log continued. The hegemony leaders asked me why we did it, why we risked our lives for people we barely knew. I told them it wasn't about risk. It was about what was right. They said that was a very human answer. I guess it was. As the research team prepared to leave the reconstruction chamber, they carried with them a new understanding of their place in the galaxy. Humans weren't feared because they were dangerous. They were respected because they were human, creative, compassionate, and utterly committed to the idea that everyone deserved to be free. But they also carried a sobering responsibility. If this was humanity's role in the galaxy, what did that mean for their future? And what would happen when the galaxy faced its next great challenge? Senator Dan Miller stepped off the transport ship and onto Nexus Prime with a mixture of excitement and growing concern. As humanity's lead representative for formal admission to the Galactic Coalition, he had expected ceremony and celebration. Instead, he found alien delegates who looked like they were attending a funeral. Senator Miller greeted Ambassador Lisa Carter, who had been working on the negotiations for months. "Welcome to what might be the most complicated diplomatic situation in human history." Dan followed her through corridors that seemed designed more for containment than comfort. The walls were thick with multiple security checkpoints and what appeared to be emergency blast doors every few hundred meters. "Lisa, why does this place feel more like a prison than a diplomatic station?" "That's what we're trying to figure out," she replied. "Every alien species we meet treats us with extreme deference. They agree to everything we ask for, give us technology we haven't even requested, and bend over backward to accommodate our every need." They entered a large conference room where Dr. Holly Grant was meeting with a group of alien sociologists. The beings were from various species, some tall and thin, others short and broad, all with different skin colors and features. But they all showed the same nervous behavior around the humans. "Dr. Grant," Dan said, "what have you learned about these coalition protocols?" Holly looked up from her notes, her expression troubled. "Senator, it's worse than we thought. The coalition hasn't just been preparing for our arrival. They've been preparing for it for centuries." She activated a holographic display showing the structure of galactic law. "Look at this. 40% of coalition legal code is dedicated to what they call human interaction protocols. Everything from trade regulations to conflict resolution has special rules that apply specifically when humans are involved." One of the alien sociologists, a being with orange skin and multiple eyes, spoke up. "Senator Miller, may I ask you a question?" "Of course. When your species makes a decision to accomplish something, is there anything that can stop you?" Dan frowned. "Well, that depends on what it is. We're not superhuman or anything." The alien skin color shifted to a deeper orange. "But if humans as a species decided that something needed to be done, and you had enough time to work on it, would you eventually succeed?" "I suppose so. Humans are pretty persistent." The room fell silent. Finally, another alien, this one with pale green skin, spoke. "That is why we are careful, Senator. In our experience, when humans decide to do something, it happens. The only question is how long it takes." Dr. Holly Grant pulled up another display. "Senator, they've shown me economic models that predict human behavior with frightening accuracy. According to their calculations, if we wanted to, we could control the entire galactic economy within 50 years. "Control it how?" "Not through force or threats," Holly explained. "Through pure economic innovation. They've studied human business practices, our tendency to find more efficient ways of doing things, our ability to create new markets. They believe that if humans really tried, we could make every other species economically dependent on us." Dan shook his head. "That sounds like science fiction, does it?" Lisa Carter had joined the conversation. "Dan, yesterday I was in negotiations with the Zilani about mining rights. I suggested a new approach to asteroid harvesting that would benefit both species. Within hours, they had contacted 12 other species to warn them about potential human expansion into the mining sector. They warned them, not warned exactly. More like, prepared them. They've created an entire early warning system for human economic activity." The next day, Dan attended a Coalition Security Council meeting. The topic was piracy in the Outer Rim, but the discussion quickly turned to human involvement in anti-piracy efforts. "The situation is under control," reported Admiral Kexthor of the Coalition Defense Force. "The pirates attacked a human cargo ship, but we responded immediately with overwhelming force." Dan raised his hand. "Excuse me, Admiral. What do you mean by overwhelming force? It was just a single cargo ship." The Admiral's blue skin paled. "Senator, when pirates attack human vessels, we treat it as a code red emergency. We dispatched 40 ships to the sector. 40 ships for one pirate attack? Senator," the Admiral said carefully, "we have studied human responses to attacks on your people. History shows that when humans are harmed, they do not simply seek justice. They eliminate the problem entirely. We prefer to resolve such situations before humans feel the need to involve themselves. Captain Pete Adams, who had commanded the rescue mission, was called to give his report. The pirates surrendered immediately when they realized the ship they had attacked was human, he said. They actually begged us to take them into protective custody. Protective custody? They were terrified of human retaliation, sir. They kept saying they didn't know, that if they had known it was a human ship they would never have attacked it. After the meeting, Dan walked the station's corridors with Lisa and Holly, trying to process what he was learning. They're not protecting us, he realized. They're protecting themselves from us. It gets worse, Holly said. I've been studying their contingency plans. Dan, they have detailed protocols for what to do if humans ever become dissatisfied with the galactic situation. What kind of protocols? Immediate economic concessions, territorial grants, technology transfers, whatever it takes to keep us happy. They've calculated that the cost of giving humans whatever we want is far less than the cost of dealing with unhappy humans. They entered the station's central plaza, where beings from dozens of species were going about their business. Dan noticed something he hadn't seen before. Whenever humans approached, other species would make space, not in a rude way, but with careful, respectful distance. Lisa, have you noticed that no one ever says no to us? I was hoping you wouldn't notice that. Dan, in 3 months of negotiations, I haven't received a single rejection. Every request is met with enthusiasm, and often with additional offers we didn't ask for. They sat at a cafe where the alien server, a being with crystalline skin, immediately offered them the best table and refused to accept payment. After it left, Holly leaned forward. I've been doing historical research. Dan, this pattern has been going on for centuries. Whenever humans encounter a new species, that species immediately begins implementing what they call friendship protocols. Friendship protocols? Think about it. First contact with the Zilani. They immediately offered us trade agreements that heavily favored humanity. The station grants us quarters in the most secure section and gives us access to technologies they normally restrict. Every species we meet offers us gifts, knowledge, territory, whatever they think we might want. Dan was beginning to understand. They're not being generous. They're being careful. Exactly. They've studied us, Dan. They know that humans respond well to friendship and cooperation, but poorly to threats or restrictions, so they've structured their entire approach around keeping us happy. That evening, Dan reviewed intelligence reports that painted an even more disturbing picture. Human exploration ships were being given star charts that carefully directed them away from areas where other species might be in conflict. Trade routes were being adjusted to avoid situations where humans might witness injustice or oppression. They're managing us, he realized during a late-night meeting with his advisors. The entire galactic community is working together to make sure we never have a reason to get involved in their problems. Dr. Holly Grant nodded grimly. Because they know that if we see something we think is wrong, we'll try to fix it. And based on historical precedent, we'll probably succeed. The implications were staggering. Humanity wasn't joining the galactic community as an equal partner. They were being carefully contained within a bubble of artificial prosperity and harmony, kept happy and distracted while the real politics of the galaxy happened beyond their sight. The question is, Dan said, what do we do about it? Do we confront them about this manipulation, or do we accept that maybe this is how things need to be? There's a third option, Lisa suggested. We could prove to them that they don't need to be afraid. We could show them that humans can be trusted with the truth. As Dan prepared for the next day's negotiations, he realized that humanity stood at a crossroads. They could accept the comfortable cage that had been built for them, or they could try to build something better, a real partnership based on trust instead of fear. The choice would define not just humanity's future in the galaxy, but the future of galactic civilization itself. Admiral Grace Thompson sat across from the Coalition Council, surrounded by representatives from 47 different species. The massive chamber was designed to accommodate beings of all shapes and sizes, but Grace noticed that her chair was positioned slightly apart from the others, with clear exit routes and what looked like emergency containment fields built into the floor. Members of the Coalition, Grace began, humanity thanks you for this opportunity to address your concerns directly. The lead counselor, an ancient being called Prime Elder Saxon, shifted uncomfortably in his biomechanical chair. Admiral Thompson, we appreciate your directness. It is very human. We've been learning a lot about how the galaxy sees us, Grace continued, and we think it's time for an honest conversation. A ripple of what could only be described as nervous energy passed through the assembled delegates. Species that had ruled worlds for millennia suddenly looked like children who had been caught in a lie. Dr. Alex Morgan stood to address the council. We know about the hegemony. We know about the Vorthak. We know about the protocols and the warning systems and the careful management of human activities. Prime Elder Saxon's ancient eyes widened. You know? We know that for 800 years, galactic civilization has been structured around a simple principle. Keep the humans happy and occupied, and maybe they won't notice the problems we can't solve ourselves. The chamber erupted in a dozen different languages as delegates whispered urgently among themselves. Finally, Saxon raised one of his forearms for silence. Admiral Dr. Morgan, you must understand our position. Your species has a history of intervention. Intervention? Grace asked. A delegate from the rear of the chamber stood up. It was tall and ethereal, with skin that seemed to be made of flowing water. When the hegemony oppressed 3 galactic arms, humans ended their rule in 2 years. When the Vorthak threatened to consume all organic life, humans eliminated them in 18 months. When the Machine Collective began converting biological species into cybernetic slaves, humans convinced them to abandon their programming in 6 months. Grace frowned. Machine Collective? We don't have records of that conflict. It happened 400 years ago, the water being continued. A single human diplomat named Sarah Martinez spent months talking to the collective's central intelligence. She convinced it that forced conversion was morally wrong. The entire collective chose to self-destruct rather than continue their actions. Dr. Alex Morgan was frantically taking notes. How many other interventions were there? Prime Elder Saxon consulted a holographic display that appeared before his chair. In the past 8 centuries, humans have been involved in resolving 47 major galactic crises. The average resolution time is 8 months. The average casualty count is less than 1% of what our projections suggested would be necessary using conventional approaches. We're not trying to control the galaxy, Grace said. We're just trying to help. That is precisely what makes you so terrifying, Saxon replied. Other species seek power or resources or territory. Humans seek to make things better. There is no defense against that motivation, no way to negotiate with it, no method to redirect it. A new voice joined the conversation. Counselor Vexhai, a being with orange crystalline skin, activated her translation matrix. Admiral, may I share something with you? Of course. 3 months ago, there was a famine on the outer rim world of Kepler 442b. Standard coalition response would have been to send food aid over a 6-month period, accept the loss of approximately 12% of the population, and help the survivors relocate. Vexhai paused, her crystal skin shifting to a deeper orange hue. A human survey ship detected the famine. Within 2 weeks, you had organized relief efforts from 17 different species, established new agricultural systems that would prevent future famines, and created a trade network that made the planet more prosperous than it had ever been. That's just the right thing to do, Grace said. Yes, Vexhai agreed. That is exactly the problem. Humans don't just solve problems. You solve them in ways that make everyone involved better off than they were before. You turn crises into opportunities for improvement. Dr. Alex Morgan looked up from his notes. Are you saying that's a bad thing? Not bad, Prime Elder Saxon said carefully. Unprecedented. In 4 billion years of galactic evolution, no species has ever combined your level of intelligence, creativity, and genuine desire to help others. Most civilizations develop either wisdom or power. Humans developed both, along with an inexplicable compulsion to use that combination for the benefit of strangers. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication. A junior aide approached the council chamber and whispered something to Saxon. The Prime Elder's expression changed dramatically. Admiral Thompson, he said, we have just received word of a crisis in the Andromeda sector. A solar flare event has damaged the life support systems on 3 colony worlds. Estimated casualties are in the millions. Before Grace could respond, her communication device activated. Admiral, this is Captain Sam Wright aboard the Harmony. We've detected the emergency in Andromeda's sector. Request permission to respond. Grace looked at the council. How long would it take coalition forces to organize a response? Standard emergency protocols require 6 days to assemble the necessary resources, Saxon replied. Grace activated her communicator. Sam, how quickly can you get there? We're 18 hours out, Admiral. We've already contacted the Zilani, the Kreshtai, and the Mineral Union. They're sending everything they have. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez says she can have new life support systems fabricated en route using the fabrication matrices the Zilani gave us last month. Grace turned back to the Council. The human response fleet will be on site in 18 hours, with full resources from 4 different species. Is that acceptable to you? The silence that followed was profound. Finally, Prime Elder Saxon spoke. Admiral, this is why we are afraid of you, not because you are evil or aggressive, but because you make us look inadequate by comparison. You just organized a multi-species rescue operation in less time than it takes most civilizations to fill out the paperwork. Dr. Alex Morgan stepped forward. Prime Elder, what if I told you that we want to teach other species to do the same thing? Teach us? The techniques we use, the organizational methods, the rapid response protocols, they're not secrets. We'd be happy to share them with anyone who wants to learn. The chamber fell silent again, but this time the silence felt different, less fearful, more thoughtful. Counselor Vexai was the first to speak. You would teach us to be more like humans? Not to be more like humans, Grace corrected. To be better versions of yourselves. Humans aren't special because we're human. We're effective because we've learned to work together, to see problems as challenges instead of obstacles, and to believe that things can always be improved. Prime Elder Saxon leaned forward in his chair. And if we learned these methods, if we became more efficient and effective, you would not see us as competitors or threats? Why would we? Dr. Alex Morgan asked. A galaxy where everyone can solve problems quickly and effectively is a galaxy where there are fewer problems to solve. That benefits everyone. The formal negotiations continued for 3 more days, but the real breakthrough had already happened. For the first time in 8 centuries, the galaxy was considering the possibility that humans weren't a force to be managed or contained, but partners to be embraced. Captain Sam Wright's mission to Andromeda's sector became a model for future coalition responses. Working alongside alien specialists, human organizational skills were combined with alien expertise to create rescue operations that were faster and more effective than anything previously imagined. 6 months later, Admiral Grace Thompson stood in the same council chamber, but the atmosphere had completely changed. Humans sat alongside alien delegates not as dangerous guests to be carefully managed, but as full partners in galactic civilization. The Andromeda's rescue was just the beginning, Grace told the assembled representatives. In the past 6 months, our joint response teams have handled 14 emergencies, established new trade relationships between 37 species, and created educational exchange programs that are already showing remarkable results. Prime Elder Saxon, looking more energetic than he had in centuries, activated his display. The efficiency improvements have exceeded all projections. Response times are down by 70%. Resource waste has been reduced by 60%, and citizen satisfaction surveys show the highest ratings in recorded history. Dr. Alex Morgan added, more importantly, we're seeing innovation from every species involved. The Zilani have developed new fabrication techniques, the Kreshtai have created improved communication systems, and the Mineral Union has revolutionized resource distribution. Everyone is contributing. As the session concluded, Grace reflected on how much had changed. The galaxy had spent 800 years fearing human intervention, not realizing that what they really feared was their own potential. Humans hadn't brought order to chaos. They had simply shown everyone that they were capable of far more than they had believed possible. The final entry in Grace's official log read, "Humanity has found its place in